Hi, this is Alex from devstories.eu. SQLAlchemy, Episode 4 of 7. You have written your models, your engine, and your queries, but dropping them all into a single file is a fast track to a maintenance nightmare and circular imports. The solution is project layout, structuring your application. When you look at tutorials, the code is usually contained in one script. You see the engine setup, the base class, the models, and the queries stacked top to bottom. That design is great for learning the syntax, but if you try to build a production system that way, it falls apart. As soon as you add web routes or background workers, you run into trouble. If a web route needs to import a user model, but the user model is in the same file that starts the application server or initializes the database connection, Python gets confused. You end up with circular imports and your code becomes impossible to test. You need strict separation of concerns. The standard pattern is to break that single script into distinct modules based on their job. First, you create a dedicated file, typically called database.py. This file has exactly one responsibility, which is managing the database connection. This is where you put your create engine call and set up your session maker. You do not define tables here and you do not run queries here. By isolating the engine, you ensure that your application only creates a single connection pool. Any other module in your project can safely import the session maker from this file without accidentally triggering application startup logic. Next, you move your table definitions into a file called models.py. This file contains your declarative base and all your mapped classes, like a user or an address object. It imports nothing from your database file. This is the part that matters. Your models define the shape of your data, but they do not know how to connect to the database. Because models.py has no dependencies on the engine or the active session, you can import your mapped classes anywhere in your application without worrying about side effects. If your project grows large, you might even split models into a directory with separate files for different domains. As long as they all import the exact same declarative base instance, SQLAlchemy knows they belong to the same metadata collection. Finally, you need a place to actually execute your queries. You keep query execution entirely separate from your models and connection files. Usually, this goes into your route handlers or dedicated service files. When an application needs data, the service file imports the session maker from your database module and the required mapped classes from your models module. It opens a session using a context manager, runs a select statement, retrieves the objects, and lets the context manager safely close the connection when the block finishes. The service file acts as the coordinator. Structuring your project this way keeps your connection logic isolated, your data scheme is portable, and your business operations clean. The single most important rule to remember is that your data models should never import your database engine. That is all for this one. Thanks for listening, and keep building.